those papers in the Acoustic Society of America that talk about piano tone, they'll describe an individual piano note as having a two-part tone. They'll use a pair description. And they use different authors use different pairs. The pair I prefer are impact sound and sustained tone. Now the other thing you need to do is a piano is actually three instruments in one. You've got essentially the vocal range, where people sing, which runs between here and here. And then up here I call this the meadowlark treble. You want it to sound like beautiful bird song up there when you're playing, sort of. And then down here, you've either got a gong sound. Most pianos are more gong-like, but there are some pianos, like some of the old Chickarings and some of the Mason Hamlins, that almost sound like a pipe organ, a little like a wind sound. So those are the kind of standard archetypes that have been developed within the framework of piano tone. And what I did is I looked at also what's happened in linguistics. In linguistics, they've shown, and this is how they can synthesize speech, because they've shown that all human languages can be broken down into these same little bits of sound, which they can describe with digital domain, in the digital domain. And then they can put all those things together with the proper algorithms to produce sounds, synthesized sounds that we recognize as very specific speech. And that the computer can also, when you talk, you talk into it, and it can follow and figure out what you were saying. So for that to work, we have to hear the same enough. So it's not like tone or sounds that each one has our own individual world of sound and they don't relate to anybody else. We're tremendously linked that way. We're physically hardwired for intellectually intelligible sound. And that was developed by Noam Chomsky. He's back in the 50s, this stuff, and it's the standard model of, if you go to linguistics and take a linguistics course, you're going to learn that model. So what I also did was look at, well, how do singers sing information? How do they sing sounds? Opera singers, I was thinking, specifically that. And because many instrumentalists, what they want, they'll say about instruments, well, I want it to sound like it sings. I want an instrument that sings. And I sort of paraphrase as Duke Ellington, I guess. It don't mean it don't mean a thing if it ain't got that swing. I flip around and say, it don't mean a thing if it ain't got that sing. And so when you get to the piano in that two-part part, I use impact sound and sustained tone. And the impact sound is the time the hammer's on the string, how long it's hitting. And you can listen to that. That little short at the start. Okay. Now, when that gets too prominent in a piano, and most pianos, your piano included, has too much of that to really produce a nice singing tone, essentially the best way to think of that is sip, 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 sip. It sounds like a lisp. You can't sing Rossini with a lisp. Or, you can't sing with a lisping sound. So most pianos are suffering from that. Then the sustained tone within this vocal range, it should have a vowel tone to it, depending on dynamic level. You should be able to hear a hint of this. Because if you've ever studied singing, singers go, they warm up with that kind of, the E is the hardest vowel, and the Oo is the softest. And what you want in a piano is that tone decays. It went from a hard, you want to hear that E at the upper dynamic levels, and as it sustains, you should hear it shift through the different vowel colors as it goes. Or if you play that note at that soft level to begin with, you should hear that softer vowel. And what that lets you do when you're playing music, when you have an instrument, a piano that does that, is you're able to link all sorts of voices together, just like each one of those is some singer. And our ears will then hear it like, oh, there's a singer there, there's a voice there, there's a voice there. Even when the dynamics among the voice, you can have inner voices or upper voices that are dynamically below others, and yet you can still hear them well if that vowel tone can be linked like it sounds like someone is singing a sound. So that's what I've been working on in the work I've done with pianos. Like 20 years ago, I did a book where I talked about essentially just the relationship between the hammer and the string and a few other things. That's a simpler thing to actually research than getting into the soundboard and doing a lot of complex analysis of what's going on there. So for a couple of reasons, you can put together 100 actions in a year, and I can only do maybe 4 or 5 soundboards in a year. So the numbers of sequential things you can do are there. So what I've been doing in the last 20 years is I'm writing a second book, which I call, the first book was The Educated Piano, and the second book that I'm doing is called Grand Delight, and the subtitle is the native tongue of piano tone and touch. So that links together the idea of using linguistics. And because what I came up with in that first book, in the tone regulation, I came up with a feedback loop where the mass of the hammer is actually developed in relationship to the individual leverage of the piano, because each piano action is actually a little bit different. And you can't just say that each hammer should just weigh, have or you just weigh each hammer and say, oh, it should be 4.26 grams, and that's perfect for that note. And it doesn't work that way. So I developed feedback loops in there for it to come up with a system I call light hammer tone regulation. So anyway.